Welcome to Future Foodcast. I'm Pamela Miller, your host. We love to cover innovation in the food space, and today we have an expert with us. He's actually with the United Nations. His name is Bernhard Kowatsch, and he is the head of the Innovation Accelerator of the World Food Program. Welcome to the show, Bernhard.
It's a great pleasure to be here, Pam. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, you have a wealth of information to share with us and such a great background. But first of all, there's a lot going on in the world right now that the United Nations and particularly your interests with the accelerator are involved in. Why don't you lay the groundwork for us?
So the starting point for us right now, of course, is that we are in a global food crisis. So a lot of people may not know this, but there's up to 757 million hungry people right now on the planet. And this is we're talking about chronic hunger. So people who do not have enough calories on a daily basis to live a healthy life. But what's even more disconcerting is that there's estimated 309 million acutely hungry people. So that's people marching towards starvation. And what's disconcerting about that is that essentially the last 8 years or so, hunger has been rising again. While in the long-term trend, 30 years or so, we actually, it's positive, we actually reduce the number of hungry people. Right now, it goes in the wrong direction. And this is something that we should all be concerned about, which is, caused by conflict, climate change, but also food and fuel inflation. And this is, of course, where innovation also comes in. In this global food crisis moment, yes, we could actually do more with more funding. There needs to be more effort on tackling these, but innovation could also play a role in making a step change, helping people lifting them out of hunger sustainably.
Yeah, and that's a lot of where your focus is. I know that you're working on that. Explain about the Innovation Center for those who might not know.
So we are the Global Innovation Accelerator, as we're calling it. We're working on identifying, supporting, and scaling innovations and startups that can help us either make emergency response more efficient and effective or sustainably end hunger. So we literally look for innovations or startups globally for application in the global south. So World Food Program is active in about 120 countries and territories. So wherever you hear in the news, UN is delivering food, whether it's in Ukraine, in South Sudan, in Venezuela, or Haiti, to that matter, it's the World Food Program. And then, so what we do is we're looking for innovations globally according to priorities. So we typically do calls for applications on our website. Then, people can apply. We also look for startups or innovations. We invite them to an innovation bootcamp, as we call it, which is a high-intensity training program with a pitch event. And then really it focuses on implementing those innovations, helping them scale on the ground. So there's a 6-month program where we provide grant funding, equity-free funding, hands-on support, and connections to partners in our field offices. And then the best teams go into our scaling program, which is really, that's what we're focused on. How can we find those innovations, those startups that can go to scale? And this is something where I believe in terms of also how we're set up, World Food Program as a global UN organization, our secret superpower is that we have colleagues in those 120 countries and territories. So it's not like that, while we might be based in Munich in Germany as an innovation team globally, we work with colleagues across the world to actually make it happen and work with vulnerable and hungry communities.
Yeah, I think that's the exciting part. And for our audience that's out there, take note, they are taking applications for those of you who have innovative ideas that you'd like to be considered to get involved in their innovation program. I don't know that a lot of people might know that, Bernhard, so I would like to highlight that, and they can read more about the program at your website. But that sounds like a great place for some people that have some ideas of how to improve our food system and any kind of innovation to apply. And then you're putting them through a whole program where they can learn, and then you even have the scaling up piece. That's excellent.
Absolutely. And specifically, the more advanced the teams are, the better we can help, right? So it's for us, where our mission and mandate, it sounds very daunting, is to end global hunger. But it's also something that it's for real. We are trying to do that. And it's something that, if people know about this, hunger is actually a solvable problem. It's a tough one. And it's something that hasn't been solved yet, but it's, it could be solved. And like, this is also what makes me excited about innovations where, sometimes startups that you can do something with everything else that's going on in the world. And like, maybe there's wars, conflicts and everything else. We can still show that, you're helping millions of smaller farmers that now have an increased income and they're lifted out of hunger sustainably.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the fact you have that secret little advantage of all these different offices all across the world in over 100 countries, over 120, I think you said, which is a leg up on a lot of other innovators who might be just locally based and not have the reach that you do. So you can really impact so many different areas of the world. Well, give us an idea of some of the successes that you've seen, maybe an example or two of an innovation idea that came to your program and then how you've been able to implement that.
Exactly. Let me start with a for-profit startup. It's called Ignitia, like it's a social business actually. And what they're doing, they're using artificial intelligence and satellite images to provide precision agriculture information to smaller farmers, specifically in Africa, in remote areas. And this is where it's exciting because like some people may know this from like, AI or drones or something that's being used in the US or some developed countries. But so Ignitia actually worked on this, making models that work in developing countries in particular. And even then when smaller farmers don't have a smartphone, they might only have like a feature phone to send them just text messages. And even if you then can't read and write, they might be sending symbols that says like, plant seeds now, harvest now, storm is coming. So this is exciting. And why is this exciting for us? Because it's like smaller farmers that typically would not have access to that information. And they even have about 700,000 recurring paying customers. So this is like, okay, the smaller farmers paying for this service because it helps them increase their income, right? And this is really exciting for us. Maybe there's one example. Second example to mention is an internal innovation, which is called Scout. It's a supply chain optimization tool that looks at the upstream supply chain. So in a case where the World Food Program, like there's not enough food in a particular country, we actually buy in food globally, regionally, locally. And so what Scout does, it uses AI and essentially data models to optimize, where we buy it, from where we buy it, where do we have warehouses with, what's the capacity of those warehouses. And even in the first implementation across West Africa, that AI model essentially has helped us save $5 million already that's reinvested into more food assistance for hungry people. Just to show, like, it's AI and it's something that helps us tangibly right now.
Well, and that's great. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a great point. The two things I'd like to highlight, that last one that you brought up about implementing the technology and being able to save $5 million, because one of the chief problems or obstacles that some of those in the food industry highlight is that this costs money to implement some of this technology. But the reality is, especially in your supply chain focus situation that you just brought up, there's a lot of money in the supply chain, profits that can be pulled out to apply to this technology, where it's not a net out of pocket because you're able to realize efficiencies in the supply chain and be able to redirect those funds to be able to include some of the innovation costs that you're having to take on.
Absolutely. And I think it's actually a misconception at times where, understandably, where people might think about like, well, this is like, this is a distraction, but in actual fact, you can make some of the core work more efficient and effective. Like the same way we want to have better services for when we think about like our daily lives, the same applies to like a lot of like, even providing help, providing assistance to people is like, yes, we should use the best data possible because that will help us save money and be the best organization to help those people in need.
Yeah. Your first example as well with the farmers in Africa, so important in the third world countries where a lot of those family-owned smaller farms are, and they're just not as connected to the food system as some of the larger ones are. So the fact that you can meet them where they are, and even if they don't have a smartphone, if they just have a regular phone, sending their symbols to indicate that they should implement different procedures at that time. It costs them money to subscribe to that, like you said. However, they're getting gains in increased yield. They're able to protect against whatever weather events might be coming that they wouldn't normally know about. But because of the technology that you're able to plug them into, they can know about that. I mean, that is genius and so helpful. It's like a real tangible implementation of technology.
Exactly. And I think this is also an example where, you showcase that you can actually leapfrog into like a future that is more inclusive for everybody, where everybody benefits. Because a lot of times, like the argument is like, well, it takes time to develop. Maybe, but like when you look into certain advances in technology, AI, like also mobile technology, like a lot of things that we now have available, there's a lot of things that we can actually make use of. And as you're saying, it's not just about giving, like donating and giving something away for free, but it could be actually a for-profit business model where it's a business for a company. And at the same time, people are having like increased incomes, improving their lives.
Right. And the fact that you can connect them with the food system in some way, I mean, that's huge as well. So they can negotiate better prices and all of that goes on. Because the reality is, the bottom line is, we want to keep our farmers farming. And so we have to
Exactly.
help
And
them.
and like also maybe to even emphasize is, like, out of the 757 million hungry people on the planet, it's estimated about 500 to 600 million of them are smallholder farmers. So like, if we're serious about tackling global hunger, like we need to be serious also like how we create these food systems that are inclusive, so that enable also the smallholder farmers to continue growing the food and actually have a sustainable income.
Amazing. Well, and your numbers that you brought up just then and also at the very beginning at your open are staggering. And certainly if we don't get all the way to solving that food problem and the hunger problem across the world in our lifetime, at least let's make a big dent in that problem. There's a lot of things that can be done. Well, what else is happening out there in the world? I know you're involved internationally with different, the UN General Assembly, different organizations that have meetings. I mean, is there any other news that you'd like to share with us that's going on out there?
No, and I think what is sometimes overlooked is that, there is also progress, even with all the challenges, with all the crises that go on the planet. There is sometimes positive news. Actually, just most recently during the UN General Assembly, there was a pact for the future that was approved by the UN General Assembly, which is exciting in a way, because not only does it talk about, like, how the world wants to come together to tackle poverty, but also like how we use technology as a world. Like, for instance, for AI, it includes specific regulations that would talk about, like, okay, how do we believe as a world that AI should be more inclusive and like governed in a way that's, ethically also safeguarding and inclusive for people. And I think these are the types of topics that are sometimes seems a little remote, but globally, when you think about, like, startups, technology, innovation, it is something that should be also on our minds in terms of, like, if we do technology development, who has the best ideas? Somebody who sits in an office like thousands of miles away? Or is it maybe somebody who is like locally working with the people, and maybe if they have access to the best technology to, what to do, like then we find those solutions, these ingenious like innovations that can help us tackle some of those problems.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to highlight the fact that people can make applications about innovation right on your website, because often those with the feet on the ground that are either the farmers or interfacing with the farmers, they see firsthand what's happening, and usually are the ones that come up with the great ideas for things, changes that can be implemented or thoughts. And they might not even know all of how to implement everything to make a difference, but they're seeing what's happening. So thanks for bringing that out. Well, there are some areas of the world that are having a really hard time right now. I know previously you had mentioned the Sudan, and I'm sure there are other areas, and how you've been able to maybe evaluate what's happening there and apply some innovative technologies. I don't know if you'd like to share some of that.
No, and I think this is where, like, Sudan, I mean, the situation is heart-wrenching. So actually, a couple of weeks ago, there was an official famine declaration in Sudan. Now, people who know what that means is like it is really, really bad. So that means that there's a proportion of people that essentially will be dying of hunger, even after everything else, all the food assistance that has been provided. So it's one of those cases, and like I think this is something that should be disconcerting, like because what you hear in the news oftentimes is like, yes, you hear about like the big crisis, but then maybe Sudan doesn't even make the news headlines anymore. And then you go on, you talk about the Democratic Republic of Congo, Haiti, like situations in the world where civilians are suffering. And like oftentimes it's like, there's millions of people being displaced. And I think this is something where oftentimes it's the sheer extent of suffering is unimaginable. And that's just something where, like, I believe now, if people are interested in what's going on in the world, like maybe that's a topic that people want to get educated more about or like read up on more. But it is really something that, can be challenging at times, even to grapple with.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we don't always know. I mean, you're in Germany, I'm in the United States. Like you said, it's not always in the headlines, certainly, depending on what else is going on in our individual countries, that we might not hear about the Sudan as much, especially if people feel like they don't know what the answers are or the current situation seems so dire. But there are solutions and some help that can be rendered out there if we can get some focus.
Exactly. And it's also something that, it's not just about like, I was just talking about problems or like what's the dire situation. I think it's as important to actually talk about some of the solutions that you can talk about. And like, in Sudan, as in some of the other countries, we've been working, for instance, on like, post-harvest loss handling, which is, people may know this as food waste. So in developed countries, sometimes it's estimated between 30 and 40% of the food that gets lost. In the global south, sometimes it's actually post-harvest loss. So it's actually food losses that occur before the food ever enters the food systems. So, and sometimes this can be 30, 40, even maybe 50% of the food that's actually being produced. Now, one of the things, and that has worked with a lot of people, smaller farmers, is a lot of them lack the ability to store the food. So like you might be harvesting maize and you need to dry it and then just put it into like a special plastic bag. And by doing this, just one behavior change, you can actually store the food up to a year. And that's ingenious because the same food that otherwise, half of that would have expired or like would have been eaten by rats or something else, all of a sudden you can keep that and you don't actually have to buy it from somebody else then, when you have run out of food. We're working on the same way actually like in a public-private partnership right now, which is called Farm to Market Alliance, which is something that, it's the World Food Program, Bayer, Syngenta, Rabobank, Yara International, and Agra. So actually a public-private alliance working with local private sector entities, specifically, operating farmer service centers that the farmers, they can buy seeds, fertilizer, and credits and this post-harvest loss equipment, but they can also sell their surplus foods. And that's where, for me, like talking about like the crisis, talking about the solution is also exciting because that allows you to then all of a sudden say, well, this is actually a sustainable business model which will keep on improving smaller farmers' income. And in that case, it's, typically can be 20, 30% income increase. And that's something without continuous investment, like they actually will have additional income going forward.
Yeah, something that is a business model that you can get it kicked off and then it's going to be self-sustaining.
Exactly. And like, so for Farm to Market Alliance, it's like, it's, really also working on this, these farmer service centers and making sure that, it's actually something that can be done. And like right now, that's even happening already in 4 countries. So Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Zambia. reaching about like 600,000, over 600,000 smallholder farmers. So if you think about family size of maybe 5, you're talking about like potentially like 3 million people, right?
The impact is huge and can be applied in other areas as well. I mean, we're into the millions of dollars, right, at this point.
Exactly. No, and I think this is specifically like talking about like, global food crisis and like what can be done, like where we can show that actually it's business opportunities that sustainably contribute towards like a better planet, a better life for people. That's something that's exciting for me, but I hope also others find this exciting, where it's not just something where, yes, you donate, but this could be just a business that you're investing in.
Well, and I appreciate that you're trying to detail the problems that exist out there, which I know you only scratched the surface for our show today, but there are a lot of problems that exist out there. But the more exciting part, as you mentioned, is that your accelerator, the innovation you're doing there is really looking to the solutions to some of these. So you can slowly just pull away some of those issues and find solutions. And then, like you said, the self-sustaining, I mean, you get it started, but then you're trying to create a business model that's actually going to be profitable and that you can turn the profits back into sustaining that program. And that's where the long-term solutions are. And that's the exciting part I see in the work that you're doing with all these innovative ideas and helping them to get established and then scale and implementing in all the different countries where the UN has a footprint.
Absolutely. And it's specifically also for, if you think about it, like this is a starting point. Like imagine how much more impact could be there. If we get more people excited, like investors, startup founders, maybe somebody who is in a big corporation and say like, well, we have a product that's, maybe for affluent families, but it could also be relevant for lower income groups, in the global South. And I think this is where it could really be something, talking about technology, talking about like some new business models there, where there is a lot of opportunities out there.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you sharing from your wealth of knowledge and experience today. Bernhard, is there anything else you'd like to leave with our audience before we go?
So a lot of times people ask me like, that's great, but like, what can I do? Right. And it's something that I encourage everybody to think about, like, even their own behavior. Like if you are buying food or if you're buying products, like, what's the quality standards? Do you buy things with a fair trade label or not? So what is it that you do? But then also if you're in a corporation, maybe as a business, there is product that you can build. You could volunteer like with your expertise or like with colleagues. And of course, people can also donate. Like that's also something that's possible. I mean, you mentioned this, like I co-founded an app that's called Share the Meal. It's actually still one of the leading worldwide fundraising apps. So like with 80 cents, you can provide food or share your meal with a child or like an adult, just sharing one meal. And this is one where, sometimes it's like little things that, individually that doesn't seem like a lot, but if then a lot of people together do this, we can actually have a lot of impact.
Yeah. So you as an individual shouldn't feel like there's nothing you can do, that this is all corporate based or larger organization based. I mean, you bring it down to the individual level and each one of us can do at least a little bit towards making a positive impact.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. We really enjoyed having you.
Thanks so much, Pam. This was a great conversation.
And if you enjoyed this interview with Bernhard about the program at the World Food Program with the UN, please give us some comments. Let us know. And if you don't want to miss our next show, please subscribe. Until next time, I'm Pam Line-Miller.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.